All right, guys, I'm super excited here today with eight-time PGA Tour winner Brad Faxon. We got a really cool video planned on flow, and he's going to give you an insight into topics that he uses to coach the best in the world. Brad, first of all, thanks for coming out.
Good to see you, Josh.
Yep. We met probably about 4 years ago at a Dana Dahlquist golf school.
Yes.
And the first interaction we had, I'm not sure if you remember this, but I was actually in the middle of a lesson and you kind of stopped the group to comment on some of the topics that I was talking about. One being motion and one being flow, which is kind of what we want to do this video about. So I thought you had some really great things to say that day on flow that I thought the viewers at home could kind of benefit from. Talk about flow. How did that play an instrumental part in your career?
Well, it's a great starting point, and you know, when you're teaching players to hit the ball farther and make good golf swings, you talk about flow in your swing, in long driver swings. It's true in every part of the game. I've had some big people in my life, my golfing life, that were influencers. Bob Rotella was a sports psychologist that talked about keeping putting athletic, keeping golf athletic. Golf tends to be the most overtaught sport in the world. If you look at all the magazines, everything you can find now on social media, whether it's on YouTube or anything you want to learn, you can just click and you're there. And I've yet to, in my golfing career, have people that have come to me for help that tell me I need to slow down more, I need to take more time, I need to think about more, I need to be still longer. I don't hear great players say that, and certainly that would trickle down to, I don't think average golfers need to do that either. They need to spend more time practicing like tour players have done all their lives. But I had an unbelievably cool experience early on as a tour player in Orlando, where you are, and we were at the tournament at Disney World, and Ben Crenshaw, who had won the Masters for his first time a few years before. We're at Disney, we had kids, we're out on the putting green at the Palm Course, and a friend of mine who was an instructor at the time wanted to video Ben Crenshaw's putting stroke. And I was nervous because I didn't know him well enough to ask, hey, this is my friend that wants to video your stroke, but I did, and Ben was gracious. And he actually said something that really surprised me. He said, I'm not putting well right now at the moment. And this was in October, it was kind of after the peak of the season. Like, why would Ben Crenshaw admit to me that you know, he's not putting well? And he said, I'm stroking at it, not through it. And that's a little hard to understand. What does that mean, at it, not through it? And he said, well, when I've putted my best, I've always had a longer backstroke than a follow through. And I like to allow my head and my knees to move. And now that makes you kind of like, what did you just say? Because everybody's trying to say still when they putt, and he goes, no, I want to have some movement. He says, as a matter of fact, in the putting stroke, it's like a mini swing. There's weight shift, there's turn, and he uses the word flow. And I'm like, wow. So when Ben Crenshaw talks, you listen, right? It's like E.F. Hutton. But Crenshaw said that to me, and it was almost like it allowed me to not be too careful. It allowed me to, okay, it's okay if my knees move a little bit. It's okay if I'm not static when I'm over the ball. And when he said that to me, we watched him putt, you could see that immediately. And then John Houston came over, another good tour player who was spectacular on the greens early in his career, especially on Bermuda grass. And John Houston didn't know we were talking about him. He was, say, 30, 40 feet away. And Crenshaw said, just watch Houston hit a few putts. And you could see a little bit of motion in his stroke. And it's subtle, but it wasn't tight. It certainly looked rhythmic and athletic. And I was lucky enough to hear that earlier in my career, that it had an influence on what I believe in is important.
And I was just about to ask you, at what point in your career were you, and how much do you think that accredited to your success on the greens later in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I always talk about, I grew up in New England and in Rhode Island on a course called Rhode Island Country Club. And a lot of the courses around there that were Donald Ross courses, whether it was Wannamoisa Country Club or Metacomet, they had greens with a lot of tilt to them. And most of them were back to front. And it was rare that you would have a putt that was inside the hole. So I learned from a young age what slope does to the putt. You know, and I didn't learn it through studying a science book, right? I learned this from being out in the field. And as a caddy, I was always interested in watching the players that I caddied for, whether they were good golfers or not, and just watching the ball roll and stop. And when it was dew on the grass in the mornings, you could see that sort of action track picture of the ball. And that was something I've kept in my head ever since I was 12, 13 years old when I started caddying. And I always see that path when I line up putts, when I go out to the putting green. So I learned from a young age, I think, a lot about what it takes to make a putt go in. And we've talked about stuff all the time about how the average golfer doesn't know how to play enough break. They under-aim, then they compensate throughout their stroke. When I was a kid in Rhode Island, there was one particularly good amateur player named Norm Lutz who was one of the best putters. He had an old bullseye putter. He had a little forward press. He loaded that putter up, and load is something we'll talk about in a minute, but he loaded the putter up so the putter got behind his hands, but it always released, and the putter head always passed the hands. And it looked to me like the coolest thing ever to see this little thin bladed bullseye make that ball go rolling so good and him making so many putts.
So to talk more about the setup, okay, so quite simply put, you like feelings of movement, some type of trigger to get that thing going. And obviously, you know, my viewers know that I'm a big believer of creating motion in the feet, creating some type of waggle for multiple purposes, especially as it relates to speed. I'm always trying to ramp that up as I'm trying to hit it harder. What would you say to people who kind of use the argument that should the higher handicapper be implementing those things? Because a lot of times people get scared that movement is going to create low point issues.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And whenever you're in the beginning stages of learning about the game, whether it's full swing or chipping or putting, and you're going through conscious thought, everything seems to slow down, gets less athletic. There's a loss of flow there. And then I get that part. That's an important part of the game anybody has to go through to learn some kind of technical parts of the game. What I like to see the most is this continuous motion. I use those two words to talk about flow, and I think about putting as a few other different sports. It's a tennis serve, it's a basketball free throw, and it's a baseball pitcher, where they have the ball and they have to create some motion to get that ball going as fast as they want it to go or in the direction they want it to go, which is what we're trying to do when we putt. So if you're doing, I mean, I think I've never seen an athlete look prettier than Roger Federer does in his motion and his flow, and watching him when he goes through a tennis serve. And I like to see that with putting, where it's almost from the ground up, where feet are always moving, fingers are moving on the grip, and once that slows down, it kind of moves up the chain. So when the eyes are looking at the ball and come at the hole and back to the ball, there's a slight forward press, whether it's a grip press, the fingers have stopped moving around, and things don't seem to have any place where they get static.
Yeah.
And when I see somebody in that spot where they're still for a long time, I'm like, their conscious brain's working. And if you want to get better at this, if you want to stay good at this for a long time, that's not going to work consistently well.
Agree. And the interesting point of that too was you said that when you're looking at your players, you're even looking at how they walk. Talk about that a little bit. What's the importance of watching someone's gait cycle and what you could kind of gather from that?
Yeah, and that's some stuff I learned a little bit from watching or being around Bob Rotella a long time. But I just kind of watched their movement around the green. What do they look like when they get there? Do they walk confidently? How do they line up a putt? And I also will often video them hitting little chip shots, and I'll tell them, look, I'm not looking for your technique here. I just want to watch you hit a little chip shot. It's the closest swing to what a putting stroke
right.
is. And how quickly do they make their practice strokes? How much ease and effort is there for a chip shot? And then do they do the same thing with a putter? Because invariably I see people with their putting strokes be very careful, very slow, very conscious looking. Yeah. And I like to look at that part of them and how they move around. And you see a lot of players wipe the face of their putter with their hands. They'll put their hand on their left side, on their left thigh if they're right-handed. And whether that's engaging their central nervous system or just gaining some feel, if it's just habit. A lot of players do those same things over and over again. I want to see, do you do those things over and over again when the chaos of the first tee starts? Right. You know, when you get out there on the first hole and it's not a practice green anymore, can you still do the same thing over and over again?
Very cool. Well, let's, if you don't mind, hitting some putts. Sure. And just kind of talk through some of these things that we talked about, some of the motion components. We're going to film a video about kind of how the putter's loading as well. But just take them through your setup if you don't mind, and kind of, if you can, tell people what you're feeling, kind of how you go about your process.
Okay, now if this were a putt I was going to have on the golf course, that might be a little bit different than just warming up to figure out what the speed of the green is. Okay. But I've been a advocate of using a line on the ball. Okay. I've always used a Sharpie line. I use that for my start line. It's something I practice hard to get good at because a lot of people get annoyed by it and they have some angst. And I'll try and find the line I want this ball to start on. So I'm pretty precise when I do that, Josh. You know, aiming it where I want the ball to go, and for a long time, you know, if I had this ball and that might be a cup to the left here on this breaking putt, sometimes when you get over the ball, it looks different when you're over the ball than from when you're behind the ball. Mm-hmm. So I had to learn what it would feel like from the, over the ball, which is when I'm hitting the putt. Right. But once I get into my routine, Josh, the thing I want to do is make sure this is pretty consistent. So I have a picture of where this ball's going to go. And as I'm walking in, I'm seeing that same path I used to see when I was a kid caddying. Right. And that path is same width of the ball.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Some people like it as a line, and
why the width of the ball though versus
that's what I would see in the dew of the grass, okay. And I see that path as the width of the ball. And that's funny because I have this line that's pretty narrow that I can see. Helps me to make my path, but what I don't do is I don't really consciously try and aim my face to that line. Got it. And I think that's an extra step of caution. Okay. I put the putter down trusting that I'm going to get it close enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people wouldn't like that necessarily, but I would be one that instead of using, for better players here especially, that like to use gates and like to make sure that face is aimed perfectly at address, I'm almost better, like if the face were a little enclosed and a little bit open at address, are you good enough to manipulate that putter and figure out how to open and close
So you're almost looking for those imperfections.
Yes, yes.
Interesting.
So my routine, and I've been good at this for a long time, is I'm going to see this little path. When I walk up, I'm continuing to see this line come down the way I want it to go. Putter's always in my right hand. I'll put the putter down first, and even before I've taken my full stance, I'm taking one practice stroke. And one of the things with the practice stroke that I think helps me and helps a lot of players is my practice stroke is typically a little bit longer than I'm going to use for the putt itself. Okay. I think I see too many people that are trying to make their putting stroke look great, their practice stroke, and I want to see this thing. I want to feel that thing, that putter head swing. I want to feel the weight of the putter head, and I want to feel that putter head get behind my hands. Again, I'm not thinking about that stuff when I'm out here.
You're sensing it.
I'm sensing it. Yep. I know I'm doing it. So again, out to the side, I have one practice stroke. I set the ball up, I look once, feet go in, they're moving, legs are moving, and then that's my routine, and that's how I try to do it every single time.
I love it. I love it. And the thing that I noticed there was from the time your feet were moving to the time you actually pulled your trigger, there was not much time in between there. No. And for myself, as someone who came from kind of the shackles of golf instruction, I kind of felt like I was robbed of my athleticism to an extent. And one of the biggest things that helped me get out of that cycle was understand the importance of movement. And what that did was that helped create a reactive environment for me. And it got me to where my brain kind of got out of the way and it let me be the athlete that I am.
So
Right.
really cool. Guys, I think that's a great video.
We got 3 more videos planned for you. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Brad, tell them where you can find them. You're now active on YouTube and Instagram.
Daniel, where am I active? Instagram, Faxon, Twitter, Brad Faxon, and YouTube, Brad Faxon.
All right, guys. And don't forget to check out hitbombs.com. We got some new merch that just dropped. Go get yourself a black long sleeve dry fit tee. Brad, thank you very much.
Wonderful
Josh,
video.
Thank you. I'm glad it went in. That always makes it look better.